and welcome to the Relationship Restaurant. This is episode 49. We are Poppy and Geoff Spencer, delighted to have you with us. We are all about heart-healthy communications with our episodes, and in episode 48, we talked about toxic relationships.
And how to guard yourself against them.
Absolutely, and this is a time of year where toxic relationships can rear their ugly heads. It's the holidays, and we're all gathering, and this is where it's almost like a tinderbox and a match is walking in the door, getting ready to blow some things up. So
we have some tips for you with some of our trusted colleagues to help you through the holidays, whether you're in a toxic relationship or you have extended family and friends that might be gathering together and in a toxic relationship, what you can do to shield yourself. So first of all, a toxic relationship, according to a psychotherapist, Carl Melvin, says is one which takes more than it gives. And when it does give, there's always an agenda. So we've seen this many, many times. There's strings attached. If I'm going to give you a little bit, I'm going to make sure that I get a lot more in return.
You're going to pay for it.
So it tends to exist when one person in the relationship is only concerned with themselves. And if there's a past, emotional baggage, it usually seeps into the current relationship. One of the things that's often...
Let's stop on that point. The reason it does...
is because...
it was never dealt with.
It was never dealt with.
Right. These are things that we often just push aside and ignore and just carry from relationship to relationship. And people often ask themselves, how does this keep happening to me? How do I keep having these kind of problems in a relationship? And why can't I make them work? It's usually because these items haven't been addressed.
Right, or examined. And that's one of the things that prompted us to create our communication tool, which we've trademarked, called the Emotional Clock. And on it has 6 negative emotions on the right side and 6 positive emotions on the left side. And it's a starter to help people to begin approaching those really dicey conversations and
to
issues.
Focus it on yourself instead of the other person.
Right, there's no blame.
Always relate to what you are feeling, not what the other person is doing or saying.
So often toxic relationships stem from dysfunction in a family, and many families have dysfunction.
Luckily, ours doesn't.
We all have dysfunction, right? So open communication is not welcome, according to Dr. Melvin. And secrecy, lies, white lies, deception, those are all things that are the favorite cache for someone that wants to protect a toxic relationship. So the family unit, they have issues from anger management, conflict avoidance, fear, low self-esteem, wanting to be addicted to dominance or control or power. And then also focusing on health and finances. They tend to be kind of consumed with that. But he says emotional dysfunction is often at the root of the problem with a toxic family situation because emotional dysfunction often drives this unhealthy behavior. So if we haven't examined it, if we haven't taken time for introspection, these things can happen.
And it's often someone else has to be the one that observes this. And this is one of the things Poppy and I were talking about before we started this episode, is that it's often important if you witness this going on in your family or your friends, whoever it is that has this toxicity that's now at play. It's very important for you to take note of it and maybe even have others in the family who are sensing it, that you share and discuss this, because it's important to say, hey, is everybody else picking up on how there's a real problem over here with, name whatever family member and relationship you care to. If everybody else is seeing the same thing, it's probably something that probably not right now at the holiday, but soon you need to probably say, hey, we were noticing that there's some issues that you guys might want to be addressing.
Right. And we actually give many of our clients actual scripts to approach those really challenging discussions so that they can feel assertive about it, but also have compassion and care when they're talking about these sensitive topics. Many times that compassion is something that we really drive home, because many times the person that is in a dysfunctional relationship or projecting that dysfunction onto others is often not even aware that they're doing it. They haven't taken the time for introspection or to examine.
They've become so mired in their own situation that they don't know anything else other than what they're in.
Right.
And they don't know that they've been lost. They don't know that they've lost perspective. They just know that this is where I'm at right now. And it can be very disruptive to others during the holiday.
And so I'm going to push a button like on a jukebox and have Geoff sing. What does Andy Williams sing?
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
So
and
a lot of people...
It isn't often for many people.
A lot of people will disagree that it's the most wonderful time of the year. And so we have some help and tips for you so that you can still enjoy the holidays without feeling obligated or resentful or even contempt for that. So oftentimes people that are in a dysfunctional relationship will not want to be around family and friends during the holidays. They have brief phone calls that are cryptic and superficial. But when Christmas comes around, there's like, okay, now I have this horrible, burdening, obligation that I have to visit. So what people do is sometimes to get over that, they come up with an unrealistic expectation that they go, well, this year will be better. When I go home for the holidays, it'll be different this year. But what they fail to do is to create an actual scenario. And we encourage people to actually role play this to create an actual scenario where it could be positively different. In other words, they will default back into that same thing because they're bringing that energy of resentment and dread into the family home or into the gathering at Christmas time. And that is ultimately will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It will turn into something negative unless you consciously, and consciously is the operative word, take the time to create a different scenario of what you desire.
We want to help people with how to deal with these situations. And I know one of the things that we always talk about when we see these kind of conversations, and it doesn't always happen at the holidays. It's usually anytime there's a gathering, but the holidays really ramp it up. But the idea of redirection. Yes. This is something that Poppy and I work very hard at when we see discussion. And this often can be driven also by generational differences. When you have 3 or 4 generations at a table, people will look at the same issues, the same points with very, very different eyes, with very different experiences of life, and often can cause many, many conflicts. That dysfunctional relationship which is the elephant in the room can be the other thing that is driving a lot of this. But we always talk about redirection to find a neutral topic to go to, a happy topic to go to. The person who is running down a path that's going to cause all kinds of conflict at the dinner table. Redirect them towards that old happy fun story that they love to tell. And look for those little windows where you can interject that and change and redirect the entire flow of the conversation.
Right. And so that's our number one point. Also, in addition to that, when sometimes they walk in the door and there's already this like sinking feeling and they feel totally disempowered when they walk in the door. And if you're that person walking in with that disempowered feeling, it can often be highlighted and revisited again because maybe your birth order in the family, you have an older sister or sibling or brother that has always been domineering and they just go back into those childhood
always
roles.
Treat you like a little kid even though you're in your 70s, huh?
Right, or 40s or 30s or whatever, and you're an adult and you're very accomplished in your work life and you're a high achiever, but then you go back home and you feel like this little kid again. So there are ways to get around that so that you don't feel disempowered, that you can just recognize that it's your sibling that actually has the issue, not you, because you have recognized.
Don't let them draw you into that conflict.
Right. You've recognized the dynamic, that is a common thing with birth order.
You shrug it off, you laugh it off, whatever you have to do is to even push it aside.
Maybe a family, maybe a parent was highly critical of you. And you're walking in the door and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get the once over look on how I'm dressed. Are my pants too tight? Is my blouse too revealing? Is it, I should have worn a tie and I didn't, all of those things are things that's about them. I would never ask
you to wear a tie, Poppy.
It's all about them, though. It's not about you. So we always say that, you can get through this. And one of the ways is, first of all, Geoff said redirection. The second is to go in with realistic expectations and to be able to walk in there and say, okay, last year was disastrous. This year, I'm going to lower the bar on my expectations, and I'm not going to assume that things will be this fantasy that I've idealized for 11 months. Instead, it's going to be what I choose to make it.
And I'm going to do my best to make it. I'm going to walk in the door with a very good attitude, and I'm envisioning a very good thing. But if it doesn't go that way,
and that's okay, because I know I can't change the behavior of anybody else in this room.
But myself.
But I can certainly be in charge of myself. And if I do see that sibling that's going to start picking at me and being annoying, I'm going to imagine this protective shield around me, this figurative shield around me that I won't take those caustic remarks, and I'm going to be in charge of my own thoughts and feelings. So you can practice that ahead of time before you go to the family gathering. The third thing is you can set some time boundaries. If you are a guest in the family home, you can say to yourself ahead of time, oh, I'm sorry, we have another obligation. I can stay for X amount of time. I can stay for an hour and a half or 2 hours. If at the end of 2 hours, everything is delightful,
you can keep going.
You can stay and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to call that other person, but we're going to stay.
If you feel your emotions rising and you know you're going to start engaging in a very bad way that you can't stop yourself, and you say, you know what? I think I need to, I'm sorry I have to go now, but I have something else I have to do.
And so that time gives you a structure that really helps to contain those emotions that get highly charged and set off by other people. And then the last thing to say is, stay onto your boundaries. Hold true to what you say. Maybe even have a plan with whoever you're going with, a spouse, a sibling, someone else. Have something written down, like, these are my boundaries. This is what's tolerable. Again, we can go back to number one. If something comes up in a conversation that's not desirable, either redirect or simply excuse yourself and go to the ladies' room or the men's room and go help with the dishes. Do something. But be kind and gift giving to yourself in the way of emotional protection to give yourself those healthy boundaries. But keep them to your, write them down ahead of time so that you have that plan. And then, of course, don't be drawn into any past issues or stories that are going to be highly charged. Don't get sucked into that. Make sure that you protect yourself and redirect. And then the last one is spend what you want on gifts. Sometimes people don't
spend a fortune on someone who you probably know is not going to be appreciative, and all you're going to do is be mad about the fact that they aren't appreciative of this expensive gift.
Yeah, and people tend to do that. People pleasers and conflict avoiders will go overboard on gifts, hoping to sort of, air quote, buy their love, and usually they end up disappointed. So again, it's back to that expectations of making sure you have realistic expectations about what to do. But always ahead of time, make the plan, make the strategy. If you want a free session with us, we have a 30-minute free consultation. We'd be happy to walk you through these steps, give you scripts for what to say for those specific issues or challenging people in your life and how to manage that.
If you go to poppyandjeff.com, you can find all the ways to contact us, emails, phone numbers, everything.
And you even have a free emotional clock download with a guide that tells you how to use it and to approach those sticky subjects.
So we hope you have a wonderful holiday season with all these great things in mind.
And this is a short one, but you know what? It's chock full of good stuff. So give us a holler if you want, and have a wonderful holiday season.
Again, we are Poppy and Geoff Spencer. This is episode 49 of The Relationship Restaurant. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, y'all.